countries are facing this pandemic in a very weak economic position, fiscal position, social, and let me also mention in terms of national security, crime, and so on.
The fiscal space most Latin American countries has is limited. They are highly indebted. They have a huge fiscal deficits, and of course, this reduces the scope for intervention, for good intervention from the government.
The additional fiscal stimulus that has been adopted in many countries, will it be a temporary expansion in fiscal deficits, or will be more permanent?
And I do worry that a lot of the policies have been done with an implicit V recovery.
And it could last very long. And if I had to put my money on it, I think it will be painful and deep and persistent and nasty.
I think we're just at the very beginning. We're probably in the second inning if we were in a baseball game. There'll be more pressures on government expenditures. There'll be less tax revenues relative to what was expected.
The pandemic may produce a huge increase in poverty rates all across the region. We are talking about more or less 5% points of increase in the poverty rate. This is huge. This is about 30 million people in the region by the end of this year.
I think we should be realistic and say that these large deficits are going to probably last longer than what we think now. And that will have consequences.
That we have to be bold, that we have to be audacious, that we have to do whatever it takes.
Again, there's many countries that don't have a fiscal space, but there's many that don't have the capacity to spend this amount of money very quickly. And it is a lot of money.
We don't live in a region where we can afford the whatever it takes solution. We can do whatever we can. And there are a number of ceilings and restrictions that we have.
We apparently every 10 years are using this line, all it takes. But it cannot be that we are using all it takes every 10 years. Maybe I'm old enough now, but I have lived many crises. I lived the 80s crisis, the tequila crisis, the Asian crisis. Brazil has many. I won't mention Argentina.
So we have to be very smart in terms of the allocation of the budget. There are lots of pressures today. One good starting point for all countries in the region is to start planning for a budget in 2021 with base zero. There are a number of things that we were doing in the past that are probably not going to be necessary in the future or less important. We need to make sure that we open some fiscal space and to be part of the conversation. And then sure that we think, where is the highest payoff per dollar or per peso invested in our budgets? Because there will be a lot of needs for the recovery, and there will be a lot of needs to make sure that potential growth is not affected as we come out of these crises.
But there are some things that we do need to make an effort that they go back normal. One is, for example, education. I don't know your experience with homeschooling. I have to say I'm not a fan of homeschooling. There has to be some online activity, but homeschooling has disproportionately affected women. And there's a lot of work that has suggested and shown that women have been taking the burden of this. But we also don't know what are the implications of kids. We know in the 80s, we lost a generation, and it's most likely we're losing a generation now.
In a way, this is like a big public expenditure review, to use the jargon of the World Bank, in which we are so constrained that we better go through everything we are financing and have a second and careful look at all of it.